The Galactic Council chamber plunges into darkness as the emergency power systems fail, the third outage this week. When the lights flicker back on, only 7 of the 12 elder seats remain occupied. The holograms of the 5 missing species flash briefly before dissolving into static. "They took the Arcane system yesterday," announces High Chancellor Ziv, her crystalline form shimmering with stress fractures. 30 billion sentients. Gone. The Void Hegemony, a collective of dimension-shifting entities that leave only cosmic dust in their wake, has consumed 17 worlds in 6 months. 3 council species are already extinct. Elder Xorthal of the ancient Mavorians, his scaled skin hanging loosely from centuries of life, rises shakily. The chamber falls silent. Xorthal hasn't spoken in council for decades. "I have seen this pattern before," he rasps, activating a hidden console that requires his genetic signature. A restricted file materializes, footage of a small blue planet whose inhabitants fight with terrifying innovation against overwhelming odds. "Summon the humans." The council erupts. "The quarantine exists for a reason," shouts Defense Minister Coulter. "They're unpredictable, violent, impossible to control." Xorthal merely points one gnarled finger at the latest casualty projections hovering above the table. At current rates, galactic civilization will collapse within 8 months. "And what exactly," he asks softly, "do we have to lose?" The restricted archives beneath the council spire hadn't received a visitor in nearly a century. Dust particles swirled in the air as Xorthal's personal authorization overrode the security protocols. The ancient Mavorian moved with unexpected purpose for one so frail, navigating through stacks of preserved data crystals that contained the Council's most dangerous secrets. "Section H17, he mumbled, running scaled fingers along the catalog markers. "Humanity." Behind him, his aide Trelnar shifted nervously. "High Elder, perhaps I should remind you that accessing quarantine records without full Council approval is technically treason." "Yes." Xorthal didn't bother looking back. "Add it to my list of crimes." He located the crystal he sought, smaller than the others, pulsing with a faint blue glow. He slotted it into a private reader, and holographic images sprang to life around them. Earth, a blue-green planet unremarkable by galactic standards. Its inhabitants, however, defied conventional evolutionary logic. The images cycled rapidly, humans fighting against overwhelming natural disasters, adapting to extreme environments, developing technology at rates that violated predictive models, forming unlikely alliances with enemies, sacrificing individuals for collective survival in ways that contradicted self-preservation instincts. The Interdiction Commission's final report, Xorthal explained, bringing up a classified document. 300 years ago, they concluded that humanity represented an existential threat to galactic stability. Trelnar leaned forward, reading aloud. "Species demonstrates unprecedented developmental volatility. Project's exponential technology curve. Exhibits alarming comfort with self-modification. Recommendation: immediate quarantine until species either stabilizes or self-terminates." The quarantine was meant to be temporary. Xorthal sighed. "A brief measure until we understood them better." 3 centuries hardly seems brief, Elder. For beings who live millennia, it was a blink. Xorthal pulled up the most restricted file, surveillance taken from the quarantine boundary over the centuries. But we grew comfortable with them, safely contained. Meanwhile, they continued evolving. The newest footage showed human outposts at the edge of their permitted space, ingenious adaptations of limited resources, strange hybridizations of technologies the Council had intentionally kept separated. The Void Hegemony operates outside our understanding. Xorthal said, closing the archives. "Our strategies fail because we cannot think beyond our evolutionary constraints. But humans." He tapped a claw against the data crystal, his ancient eyes gleaming with something between hope and terror. "Humans specialize in the inconceivable. And if they save us only to conquer us afterward?" Trelnar asked. Xorthal laughed, a dry, rasping sound like sandpaper on stone. Then at least we'll live long enough to regret our decision. Ambassador Tila Voss wipes sweat from her brow as she recalibrates the terraforming array on Outpost Omega, humanity's furthest presence from Earth, just inside the quarantine boundary. The station's proximity alert blares suddenly, something it hasn't done in the 15 years she's been posted here. Unidentified vessel approaching. The AI announces, configuration unknown. Voss reaches for the emergency beacon, then freezes as the ship materializes. It bears council markings she's only seen in historical archives. The beam that emerges isn't what she expects. Elder Xorthal looks diminished, haunted. He extends a data crystal without ceremony. Watch, he commands. The footage shows worlds being consumed by what looks like living darkness. Cities fighting back with advanced weapons that shatter uselessly against the void. Entire planets crumbling into cosmic dust. Your species frightens us, Xorthal admits later, as Voss's hands shake around her coffee mug. Your unpredictability, your willingness to sacrifice, your creativity in violence. We contained you because evolutionary models showed you would either destroy yourselves or dominate the galaxy within centuries. And now, Voss asks, now we need precisely what we feared. The journey back to Earth passed in tense silence. Voss spent most of it reviewing the crystal's contents, absorbing the horror of the Void Hegemony's advance through council space. She'd expected to feel vindication, humanity finally recognized for their worth, but found only a hollow dread building in her chest. These quarantine beacons, she said eventually, pointing to the boundary markers they passed. They were never meant to keep aliens out, were they? Xorthal tilted his ancient head. Perceptive. No, the quarantine was dual purpose. Protection for the galaxy, yes, but also protection for humanity. From what? Exploitation. The Mavorian's eyes clouded. Not all council species shared our cautious approach. Some advocated for controlled harvesting of human potential, selective breeding programs, neural template extraction. Voss felt her stomach turn. And now desperation has achieved what ethics could not. Xorthal's scaled hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his life support pendant. Full integration is inevitable. The question is whether there will be a galaxy left to integrate into. The Beijing spaceport hadn't been designed to accommodate non-human visitors. As Elder Xorthal's delegation disembarked, maintenance crews scrambled to adjust atmospheric mixtures and gravity settings. Curious crowds gathered behind security barriers, most humans having never seen council species outside of educational programs. General Carrie Chen watched from the observation deck, her cybernetic eyes zooming in on the Mavorian elder. 15 years ago, she'd lost her arm and eye leading the infamous Boundary Incident, an unauthorized attempt to push beyond the quarantine that had ended in bloodshed. The military tribunal had called it reckless. History now framed it as a pivotal moment in human-council relations. Never thought I'd see them coming to us hat in hand, remarked Admiral Santos beside her. They're not here out of respect, Chen replied, adjusting her prosthetic arm's sensitivity. They're here out of fear. Does it matter? This is our chance. Chen's lips tightened. They contained us for centuries, Eliza. Called us dangerous, unstable. Now they want our help. There has to be a price. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't undersell humanity's value. Chen's organic eye narrowed. The quarantine ends. Completely. Technology exchange protocols established. Full voting rights on the council. Nothing less. Santos whistled low. They'll never agree to all that. The corner of Chen's mouth lifted in a cold smile. Watch me. 3 days later, the emergency summit in Geneva brought together Earth's fractious leadership. Ancient rivals sat shoulder to shoulder, united by opportunity and existential threat alike. The council representatives had expected humanity's famed disunity to work in their favor during negotiations, divide and conquer being the oldest diplomatic strategy in the galaxy. What they found instead was unsettling solidarity. Beneath the surface arguments and posturing, Earth's nations had aligned with remarkable speed around a single, non-negotiable demand: freedom. The Council's military leadership awaits the human response fleet with anticipation. They've provided coordinates to their largest shipyard, expecting Earth's most advanced warships and weaponry. Instead, a single, moderately sized vessel arrives. When the docking bay opens, out walks a diverse group of humans, barely 5,000 in total. Some wear military uniforms, but others are dressed as civilians. Scientists in lab coats, people in work clothes, even a few in what appear to be artistic or religious garments. Admiral Pax Krell of the Council forces can't hide his disappointment. This is it. This is Earth's contribution to an existential war. General Chen, leading the human contingent, approaches with a tablet. "Sign here," she says, offering a document officially ending the quarantine. "But you've brought nothing." The Admiral sputters. "Where are your warships? Your planet killers? The weapons we feared?" Chen gestures to the people disembarking behind her. A woman tests soil samples from the station's hydroponic garden. A teenager reprograms a cleaning drone to perform complex maneuvers. A gray-haired man sketches the alien architecture with quick, precise strokes. "You misunderstand," Chen replies. "These people are the weapon." The Council shipyard ascendant spiral stretched across an entire planetary orbit, its gleaming structures housing the most advanced military technology in known space. Commander Elenis, Chief of Integration, had expected to spend weeks coordinating the incorporation of human weaponry into the Council defense grid. Instead, she found herself conducting what felt like an endless orientation tour. Section 12B houses our predictive algorithm cluster, she explained, leading a particularly eclectic group through the station's computational center. It processes tactical data from across 27 sectors to formulate optimal response protocols. Dr. Sanjay Mehta, a neuroscientist whose specialization seemed irrelevant to military operations, studied the quantum processors with unexpected interest. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward a terminal. Before Elenis could refuse, Mehta had already accessed the system, fingers flying across the interface with practiced ease. "Fascinating. Your algorithms prioritize pattern recognition based on historical precedent." "Of course," Elenis replied, confused. "How else would one predict enemy movements?" A young woman beside Mehta, introduced as a literature professor, of all things, leaned forward. "But the void doesn't follow conventional patterns. They're not bound by physical constraints the way we understand them." "What would you suggest?" Elenis asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Chaos theory," Mehta replied. "Randomized response matrices governed by quantum uncertainty principles. If the enemy operates outside conventional physics, our predictions must do the same." "Impossible," Elenis stated flatly. "Our entire defensive doctrine is built on predictability and coordination." The literature professor, Dr. Park, smiled. "That's why you're losing." 3 days later, Elenis found herself in the Council war chamber, watching in disbelief as humans dismantled centuries of military doctrine. They'd formed unconventional teams that ignored traditional hierarchy. A teenage programmer collaborated with veteran tacticians. Artists worked alongside engineers, suggesting solutions that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. "They've completely reconfigured the 7th Fleet's command structure," reported her aide, visibly distressed. "They're implementing something they call emergent leadership, authority shifts based on situational expertise rather than rank." "That's anarchy," Elenis protested. "Perhaps," came Elder Xorthal's voice from behind them, "or perhaps it's adaptation." The ancient Mavorian observed the controlled chaos with something almost like satisfaction. "Did you know," he continued, "that early Council observations of Earth noted how humans thrived in disaster scenarios? When systems collapse, they innovate. When rules fail, they create new ones. But our military protocols, are designed for enemies who share our fundamental understanding of reality. Sorthel finished. The void does not. Neither, in many ways, do humans. Across the chamber, Dr. Maya Wong was leading an impromptu seminar on quantum entanglement as it related to void manifestation patterns. Council scientists who outranked her by centuries looked on with grudging fascination as she sketched impossible equations with one hand while simultaneously reprogramming a defensive array with the other. We assumed their danger lay in superior weaponry. Sorthel mused. We missed the true threat entirely. Which is? Elanis asked. They think differently. The elder's ancient eyes tracked a group of human children who had somehow gained access to the chamber, now drawing with bright markers on a strategic display as officers watched with surprising attention. And they teach others to do the same. 3 months into the conflict, Council Command can't decide whether to court-martial the humans or promote them. On Vega Prime, mining engineer Amir Kazemi ignored evacuation orders and instead stayed behind with a skeleton crew. Using industrial drilling equipment never designed for military applications, they bored into the small moon above the planet. When the void hegemony arrived, Kazemi triggered precisely calculated explosions that sent the moon crashing into the enemy's dimensional anchor point. The resulting gravitational collapse destroyed the hegemony force, along with the moon, and nearly Kazemi himself, who escaped with seconds to spare in a retrofitted cargo hauler. On Proxima II, schoolteacher Sarah Okonkwo somehow managed to communicate with the reclusive Xanthar, a species thought extinct. Her method, analyzing their ancient architecture and realizing their language was based on mathematical proportions, that Xanthar emerged from hiding with previously unknown technology that could disrupt void energy patterns. In the Helios sector, former chef Raj Patel hijacked a supply cruiser after his evacuation transport was damaged. Instead of fleeing, he flew directly into a besieged zone, using cooking techniques to mask his ship's energy signature, varying power outputs like adjusting heat under a delicate sauce. He delivered critical supplies to 3 surrounded planets, saving millions who would have otherwise starved before regular forces could reach them. Each success defies conventional military logic. Each victory comes with unorthodox methods that make council strategists uncomfortable. Elder Sorthel observes it all from his private chambers, reviewing reports with growing fascination. They don't see boundaries, he muses to his aide. Or rather, they see them as suggestions. The aide, young for a Mavorian at merely 2 centuries, appears troubled. But High Elder, they're changing everything they touch. Our weapon systems, our command structures, even our cultural exchange protocols. Is this not dangerous? Sorthel's ancient eyes crinkle with what might be amusement. My child, that is precisely why I chose to find them. The debriefing chamber aboard the Council flagship Inevitable Doctrine had never been this crowded or this contentious. Amir Kazemi sat at the center of the storm, his mining coveralls still caked with moon dust, the makeshift bandage around his head stained with blood that was decidedly the wrong shade of red by Council medical standards. You violated 17 distinct protocols, stated Fleet Commander Vaxis, her tentacles gesticulating in what humans had learned indicated extreme agitation. Evacuation directives are non-negotiable. Resource preservation protocols exist for a reason, and celestial body manipulation requires minimum 7-tier authorization. Kazemi shrugged, wincing as the movement aggravated his injuries. The moon was going to be consumed anyway. I just decided how it would be used. That's not your decision to make. With respect, Commander, interjected Dr. Maya Wong from the observation tier, the decision saved approximately 23 million lives on Vega Prime and destroyed the largest void incursion fleet we've encountered. Commander Vaxis' skin flushed a deep purple. The methodology remains unacceptable. If every defender made independent tactical decisions of this magnitude, then we might start winning this war, finished General Chen, entering the chamber with Elder Sorthel. The room immediately quieted, attendees rising in deference to the Elder's presence. Engineer Kazemi, The ancient Mavorian addressed the injured human directly. Your actions were indeed unconventional, but effective. Tell me, how did you calculate the precise detonation sequence needed to direct the moon's trajectory? Kazemi glanced at the holographic display. I didn't. Not completely. I had about 70% confidence in my calculations. A horrified murmur swept through the council officers. You risked an entire planetary system on a 30% uncertainty margin. One gasped. I've worked worse odds in asteroid mining operations back home, Kazemi replied. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts when the numbers don't give you certainty. Instinct, repeated Fleet Commander Vaxis, as though the word tasted bitter. This is what we've reduced ourselves to, gambling billions of lives on human instinct. Elder Xorthal raised a scaled hand for silence. Commander, do you recall the Faxian defense? The last great victory against the Scourge Collective 8 centuries ago. Of course, Elder. It's required study at the Academy. Then you know that Admiral Senvac violated direct orders from the High Command, trusted what she called her inner voice, and executed a maneuver with only 63% projected success probability. The Elder's ancient eyes gleamed. Before the Great Rationalization, before we codified all tactical decision-making into protocols and procedures, our greatest leaders often relied on what humans call instinct. That was different. Vaxis protested. Senvac had centuries of experience, and locked herself into suspended animation rather than accept the commendation ceremonies. Xorthal finished. Her final log entry stated that the council had grown too rigid to survive the next great threat. Perhaps she foresaw this moment. 6 months into the conflict, the council war chamber has transformed. Holographic displays show real-time battle data alongside artwork depicting void manifestations. Tactical officers from a dozen species work alongside humans in an atmosphere that blends military precision with creative chaos. Yet despite tactical victories, strategic defeat looms. The hegemony still advances, consuming worlds more slowly but inexorably. During a critical resource allocation meeting, Dr. Maya Wong interrupts the council's debate by simply walking to the central projection system and plugging in her own device, a breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable months ago. We're fighting the symptom, not the disease, she announces, displaying complex quantum equations alongside what appear to be audio waveforms. I've been analyzing void energy patterns by converting them to sound. She plays an unearthly recording that sends shivers through the chamber. This isn't an invasion march, she explains. It's a distress signal. Her analysis, combining quantum physics with musical theory, reveals a stunning truth. The void hegemony isn't invading, it's fleeing. Their home dimension is collapsing, and they're consuming worlds out of desperate survival instinct, converting matter to sustain their energy-based existence. The council erupts into argument. Some see opportunity in this knowledge. Others dismiss it as irrelevant. They're still killing trillions. Defense Minister Kaltar shouts. Their motivation changes nothing. While the debate rages, General Chen quietly approaches Dr. Wong. Can we communicate with them? She asks. Theoretically, Wong replies. But it would require direct contact with a hegemony nexus point. Essentially, someone would need to walk into the void. Ken nods and taps her communicator. Diplomat Mbeki. How do you feel about a suicide mission? Lucas Mbeki, former crisis negotiator from Earth's African Union, smiles wearily on the video feed. Tuesday as usual then. The observation deck of science vessel Empirical Certainty had been hastily converted into what Dr. Wong called a translation laboratory. Council scientists from a dozen disciplines worked alongside human specialists from seemingly unrelated fields, musicians, linguists, even a group of synesthetes who experienced sensory crossover between sound and color. This defies all xenolinguistic principles, protested senior philologist Tazreen. Communication requires common reference points. The void entities exist in quantum superposition states. They don't perceive reality as we understand perception. Elliot Barnes, a human composer specializing in algorithmic music, looked up from a complex waveform display. Perception isn't prerequisite for communication. Termites build complex structures without conscious architectural understanding. Slime molds solve optimization problems without brains. You're comparing sentient energy beings to insects. I'm saying information exchange doesn't require shared consciousness, Barnes corrected. It requires shared patterns. Dr. Wong guided the debate back to practicalities. The void emissions contain mathematical constants, recurring sequences that suggest intentional patterning rather than random noise. She highlighted a particular segment of the waveform where a sequence of pulses repeated at precise intervals. This pattern occurs in the aftermath of every world consumption. It's too ordered for natural phenomena. What does it mean? Asked one of the council scientists. We don't know yet, Wong admitted, but it resembles nothing so much as a beacon, a signal meant to be received. Elder Exorthal, who had been silently observing from the periphery, finally spoke. By whom? Before Wong could answer, the ship's alarms blared. Outside the viewport, space itself seemed to warp and darken as a massive void manifestation materialized barely 1,000 kilometers away. Evacuation protocols initiated, announced the shipboard eye. All personnel to emergency transport stations. The scientists scattered, all except Dr. Wong, who moved closer to the viewport, studying the swirling darkness with analytical intensity. It's not attacking, she observed. Look at the energy pattern. It's resonating. With what? Demanded Tazreen, frozen between fear and curiosity. Wong pointed to their equipment, where the waveform displays showed unmistakable synchronization between their analytical broadcasts and the void entity's emissions. With us, it's responding to our signals. General Chen, entering the deck with security personnel, assessed the situation with military efficiency. Is it hostile? I don't think so, Wong replied. I think it's curious. Chen's expression hardened as she made a decision that violated every council first contact protocol. Then perhaps it's time we introduced ourselves properly. Get Mbiki up here. Now, approaching hegemony boundary, announces the pilot of the small research vessel. Point of no return in 30 seconds. Lucas Mbeki checks the specialized equipment one last time. The ship carries no weapons, only communication devices, and the strangest first contact team ever assembled. A quantum physicist, a music theorist, a virtual reality designer, and a poet. For the record, the pilot says, "This is the craziest thing I've ever done, and I once surfed the atmospheric entry of a gas giant." Mbeki laughs. Noted, if we succeed, drinks are on me. And if we fail, then the universe buys the next round. The ship passes through the swirling darkness at the edge of the hegemony-controlled space. Instruments fail immediately. Emergency power flickers. Then, silence. Within the darkness, reality itself seems fluid. Dr. Wong's specially designed sensors capture energy patterns that the VR designer, Jin Park, converts into visual representations. Music theorist Eliza Okafor identifies repeating structures within the patterns, while poet Amal Hassan looks for meaningful connections. It's like they're speaking through reality itself. Hassan whispers, not with words, but with existence. The void engulfed them completely, darkness so absolute it seemed to consume light itself. Inside the research vessel, quantum dialogue, emergency lighting bathed the crew in an eerie red glow that did nothing to dispel the absolute blackness pressing against the viewports. Primary systems offline, reported the pilot, Lieutenant Nakamura, her voice maintaining professional calm despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Secondary systems at 30%. Life support stable but degrading. Mbeki nodded, unsurprised. The briefing had predicted as much. Conventional technology struggled within void-controlled space. Deploy the quantum resonators, he instructed. Dr. Wong activated a device of her own design. Crystalline structures housed in floating containment fields, each vibrating at frequencies calibrated to match the patterns they'd observed from the hegemony. Unlike the ship's conventional systems, these remained operational, their soft blue glow creating strange shadows across the faces of the contact team. Resonance established, Wong confirmed, studying her instruments. But no response pattern yet. Jin Park, the VR designer whose neural implants gave him unique perception abilities, leaned forward suddenly. There's something shifting in the void, not physically, more like potential realities overlapping. I feel it too, said poet Amal Hassan, whose synesthesia allowed her to perceive sound as color and pattern. It's like watching thoughts form before they're spoken. Mbeki had selected his team not just for their professional qualifications, but for these perceptual anomalies. Humans whose neurological variations might bridge the gap between material existence and whatever the void entities experienced as consciousness. We need to make ourselves understandable, Mbeki said, turning to music theorist Eliza Okafor. Something more fundamental than language. Okafor nodded, fingers dancing across her custom interface. Fibonacci sequences translated to harmonic progressions, she suggested. Mathematical constants expressed through sound. As the resonators began emitting carefully structured tones, the blackness outside seemed to shift, coalescing into swirling patterns that mirrored the acoustic waves. Park's neural implants translated the visual data into a three-dimensional projection at the center of the cabin, a shifting, geometric structure that pulsed in time with Okafor's composition. It's responding, Park whispered. Mimicking our patterns. Not mimicking, Hassan corrected, her eyes unfocused as she processed the sensory input through her synesthetic perception. Completing them. Adding variations. It's dialogue. Lieutenant Nakamura's voice cut through their wonder. Life support at 20% and falling. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Mbeki made a swift decision. Dr. Wong, increase resonator output to maximum. Eliza, simplify the pattern to core mathematical constants only. Jin, configure your neural interface to broadcast directly. That's extremely dangerous, Wong protested. The interface wasn't designed to. We're already in uncharted territory, Mbeki interrupted. Sometimes first contact requires first sacrifice. Park nodded, understanding the risk. His neural implants connected directly to his visual cortex. Using them to broadcast would expose his brain to whatever energies the void entities use to communicate. Ready when you are, he said quietly. As Park activated the interface, his body went rigid, eyes rolling back to show only whites. The projection at the center of the cabin exploded with complexity. Fractals within fractals, geometries that shouldn't be possible in three-dimensional space. His vital signs are spiking, Wong reported urgently. Brain activity off the charts. Jin, Mbeki called. Jin, can you hear me? When Park spoke, his voice had changed, overlapping tones and harmonics impossible for a human larynx to produce. They see us now, he said. They understand. We are different. The next phase reveals another uniquely human quality, impossible optimism in the face of overwhelming technical challenges. Dr. Wong leads a coalition of human and alien scientists to develop dimensional anchors, artificial pocket dimensions, where the hegemony can exist without consuming worlds. Council species provide the theoretical knowledge, while humans contribute the willingness to attempt what established science deems impossible. Progress is made through trial, error, and intuition rather than linear research. Failures are frequent and sometimes catastrophic, but the humans celebrate each one as a learning opportunity. Meanwhile, the diplomatic team expands communication with the hegemony, gradually building trust. Both sides suffer setbacks. Hardliners among council species attempt to sabotage negotiations, while some hegemony factions continue attacks. Through it all, the humans persist with stubborn determination. When the first functional dimensional anchor comes online, the council finally understands. Humanity's ultimate weapon was never their technology or military prowess. It was their unique combination of adaptability, empathy, and audacious problem-solving. The dimensional engineering facility, dubbed Threshold, occupied an entire asteroid that had been hollowed out and reinforced with experimental materials. Deep within its core, Dr. Wong stood before a viewport overlooking Test Chamber 7, now little more than a smoking crater after their latest failed attempt at creating a stable dimensional pocket. That's the third catastrophic failure this week, noted Council Science Director Vental, his voice carefully neutral though his secondary gill slits pulsed with stress. Perhaps we should reconsider the theoretical framework. Dr. Wong rubbed her bloodshot eyes, the sleeves of her lab coat marked with equations scribbled in multiple colors of ink. The theory is sound. It's the implementation that needs refinement. The theory violates 7 fundamental laws of physical reality, Vental reminded her. Those laws were written for this universe, Wong replied, studying the diagnostic data streaming across her tablet. We're trying to create an interface between dimensional states. The rules are different at the boundary. A junior engineer, barely 20 years old and recruited from Earth's Orbital Academy, approached with a steaming mug. Thought you could use this, Dr. Wong. Wong accepted the coffee gratefully. Thanks, Aisha. Any new insights from the failure analysis? Actually, yes. Aisha's eyes lit with excitement rather than disappointment. The dimensional pocket held its integrity for 3.7 seconds before collapse. That's nearly twice as long as the previous attempt. And look at the energy signature during dissolution. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex waveforms. The harmonic resonance maintained cohesion, even as the structural matrix failed. I think we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of trying to build a rigid dimensional structure, what if we created a self-sustaining energy pattern that defines its own dimensional parameters? Vental blinked all 3 of his eyelids in succession, a gesture of profound skepticism. Energy patterns without physical containment are inherently unstable. Unless, Wong said slowly, her fatigue forgotten as she followed Aisha's reasoning. The pattern itself becomes self-reinforcing through quantum entanglement. Not a pocket dimension we create and maintain, but a seed crystal that grows its own dimensional space. She turned to Vental, whose gill slits were now fluttering with alarmed disbelief. We need to completely redesign the anchor generators, and we need to consult with the diplomatic team. The hegemony itself might help us shake these patterns. In what had once been the officers' mess aboard the research vessel Empirical Certainty, Jin Park sat surrounded by medical monitoring equipment, his neural implants glowing softly beneath his skin. The ship had been converted into a permanent communication hub after their successful first contact, drifting in the neutral zone between Council and hegemony space. Your neurological patterns show increasing synchronization with void energy signatures, Dr. Sato reported, studying Park's latest brain scans with concern. The integration is progressing further with each communication session. Park nodded, unsurprised. His consciousness now regularly traversed the boundary between human perception and void existence, a process that left him increasingly detached from conventional reality. It's necessary, he said simply. They think in quantum superpositions. To understand them, I must partially become like them. Diplomat Miki, who had doggedly remained aboard despite Council pressure to withdraw, studied his colleague with growing concern. Park's eyes now contained pinpricks of darkness that seemed to swirl with their own inner light, physical manifestations of his altered neural state. We're making progress, Park continued, his voice occasionally harmonizing with itself in impossible undertones. They've agreed to halt expansion in the Cygnus sector while we develop the dimensional anchors. They're afraid, Lucas. Their home dimension is collapsing at an accelerating rate. Billions of consciousness patterns have already been lost. Can they explain what's causing the collapse? Mbeki asked. Not in terms we fully comprehend, Park admitted. Their conceptualization of causality differs fundamentally from ours. but they shared energy pattern templates that might help stabilize the anchor prototypes. He projected a hologram from his neural implant, swirling, impossible geometries that seemed to fold through dimensions beyond normal space. "I'll transmit these to Wong's team," Mbeki said, trying not to flinch at the alien patterns that seemed to hurt his eyes by their very existence. "How much longer can you maintain these communication sessions?" Park's altered eyes met his with uncomfortable directness. "Does it matter? This is working, Lucas. We're preventing genocide, both theirs and ours. At what cost to you?" "An acceptable one." Park's smile was serene, touched with something not entirely human. "Besides, I'm not losing myself. I'm becoming something more. Something in between. Perhaps that's what we all need to become to survive in a multiverse of possibilities." 1 year after the desperate summons, Nexus Station hangs in space at the boundary between traditional Council territory and newly designated hegemony adaptation zones. The station itself represents unprecedented cooperation, physical technology designed by Council engineers, powered by adapted void energy, and imagined into existence by human architects who refuse to accept conventional limitations. Inside the Grand Observation Dome, representatives gather. Council species in their varied forms stand alongside humans, and for the first time in public, controlled manifestations of the hegemony appear, swirling patterns of darkness and light that coalesce into approximations of humanoid forms. Elder Exorthal, looking frailer than ever, but with eyes sharp with purpose, approaches the central podium. The chamber falls silent. 1 year ago, we faced extinction, he begins, his voice carried through traditional audio and void energy patterns simultaneously. We sought weapons, hoping merely to delay our end with dignity. He gestures to the human delegation, now integrated throughout the gathering rather than standing apart. What we received instead was transformation. The humans taught us to question our assumptions, to see enemy and imagine ally, to look at impossibility as simply a challenge not yet overcome. High above the formal proceedings in the observation dome, Ambassador Voss stood on a maintenance walkway that offered a different perspective, both of the station and the momentous events unfolding below. She preferred this vantage point, away from the spotlight and ceremony. "I thought I might find you here," came a familiar voice. General Chen emerged from the access hatch, her dress uniform a stark contrast to the utilitarian surroundings. "Avoiding your own triumph?" Voss smiled faintly, observing it. "There's a difference." Below them, the elaborate signing ceremony continued. The Treaty of Dimensional Coexistence represented something previously unimaginable: formal diplomatic relations with entities that existed partially outside conventional spacetime. The document itself was unique, existing simultaneously as physical text, quantum data, and void energy patterns. 15 years ago, I was court-martialed for attempting to break the quarantine," Chen remarked, her cybernetic eye glinting in the dim light. "Now they're naming a fellowship program after me." The universe has a peculiar sense of humor. "The Chen Beiki Initiative for Interdimensional Studies," Voss nodded. "Though I understand Mbeki had to be persuaded to accept the honor." "He's changed," Chen said quietly. "They all have. Everyone who works directly with the hegemony. Park isn't even recognizably human anymore." They both glanced toward a corner of the chamber below where Jin Park stood apart from the other delegates. His form seemed to shift subtly, reality bending around him, as though he existed simultaneously in multiple states of being. His role as primary translator had transformed him into something unprecedented, neither fully human nor void entity, but a bridge between existences. "Evolution," Voss said. "Adaptation. Isn't that what saved us?" "At what cost?" "Ask Park. He considers it a gift, not a sacrifice." Chen's expression remained troubled. "And what about the next crisis? The next time the Council faces extinction? Will they summon us again, expecting miracles?" Voss turned from the railing to face the general directly. "That's why the quarantine had to end completely. We're not their secret weapon to be deployed in emergencies. We're part of galactic society now, changing it, being changed by it, and leading it, whether they intended that or not," Chen added, gesturing toward the diplomatic proceedings, where humans now occupy positions of unprecedented authority throughout the new coalition government. "Elder Xorthal intended it," Voss said with certainty. "He didn't just break the quarantine to save the council. He broke it to transform it." As the formal ceremony concluded below, the station's vast viewports revealed an extraordinary sight: the activation of the first large-scale dimensional anchor. In the vacuum of space, reality itself seemed to fold inward, creating a controlled gateway between conventional space and a newly formed pocket dimension, specifically engineered to support void energy life forms. Energy patterns that represented thousands of hegemony consciousnesses streamed toward the anchor, transitioning from their destructive material-consuming state into a sustainable existence within their new home dimension. "It's beautiful," whispered a young council aide standing near Elder Xorthal. "I never imagined the void could be beautiful." "Perspective," the ancient Mavorian replied. "The humans gave us that most of all, the ability to see beyond our perceptual limitations." Across the chamber, Dr. Wong stood beside her team of dimensional engineers, their faces illuminated by the swirling energies outside the viewport. For them, the spectacle represented not just diplomatic success, but scientific revolution. The laws of physics rewritten, the boundaries between dimensions made permeable through controlled manipulation. "Phase 1 complete," Wong reported, checking her instruments. "Anchor stability at 97% and holding. Transition patterns nominal." The Council Science Director, who had once declared their efforts impossible, now watched in undisguised wonder. "You've created an entirely new branch of physics," he acknowledged. "Dimensional engineering will transform our understanding of reality itself." Wong smiled tiredly. "This is just the beginning. The hegemony entities have already proposed 17 modifications to improve stability and expand capacity, and that's not counting what we'll learn once we begin exploring their home dimension."